So there's no reason for going back, but like that's what we all want. That's what we're all looking for. And I think sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm going to go no contact," and they feel like it's the end. It's the very, very end. And it is not common, I know, to get a happy ending with your parent, like the movies, but we want to provide you an experience where the opposite happened, where we did the opposite of what our stepmom did, where we did get what we were looking for. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Pivot Well by Sarah. I'm Sarah, and we're doing another segment with my sister, Beth. Say hi, Beth.
Welcome, welcome. Yeah, so just trickling down here, the next person that we have both at some point been no contact with, um, is our biological mother.
Yeah.
Um, the initial no contact with her was not initiated by us or her. So the initial, we briefly discussed the custody situation. I think a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah, two
Um,
episodes ago.
Yeah, so after that, shockingly, and I say that with all the sarcasm in the world, contact with her, petered out pretty quickly
Why
after.
it's shocking was she was told when she gave us up that she would still get the ability to see us, that she would have rights to see us. Our stepmom promised her that she would get to see us, and it was a taper off of her. I feel she would every once in a while get to see us, and then nothing.
Yeah, so
Occasionally, like a
let's
Christmas or Thanksgiving.
yeah, so to touch a little deeper on what you said about her rights. When I was 15 and you were whatever you would have been, depending on what time of year it was, you were either 12 or 13. Um,
12.
our mother, our biological mother, was going through a very rough time in her own mental health journey. Again, not completely our story to share. But if she's ever on the podcast and wants to share it,
I think she's going to come on the podcast, actually.
she's welcome to
Spoiler
do that.
alert.
Spoiler alert. So there was a point in her mental health journey where she was convinced by our stepmother that you and I would be better off if she terminated her rights so that our stepmother could legally adopt us.
Mm-hmm.
The reasons why vary depending on if you ask
Who?
our stepmother or our mother or us, because I think all three people were told three different stories. Um,
No, mine. I mean, I remember what she remembers, and that was that it was it was for us that she couldn't give us the life that our stepmom could give us. Is what I was
she was also told there was
told.
a financial, a legal aspect to it, that the only way that our stepmother could officially put us in like any type of will or estate planning would be if she was our legal guardian
Oh, I
as
didn't
well.
know that.
In retrospect, our dad was our legal guardian. So, and you can put anyone you want in your will. As someone who has recently worked on a will, you can name anybody.
As long as you
So,
have their date of birth, social security, and she did have those things.
all that to say, our mother was convinced and did voluntarily terminate her parental rights so that we could be adopted by our stepmom.
And
Uh,
it was a sad situation for her. It was not something when we say voluntarily, she,
it wasn't forced on her. I mean, it wasn't legally forced on her by.
no, what I mean is
No.
she didn't want to do it emotionally, but she did think she was doing what was best for us. And I believe that.
Yeah, 100%. I believe that. I personally remember thinking immediately after that it was stupid because I was 15.
Yeah.
And then they were changing names and all sorts of stuff, and I thought that was
Yeah.
the dumbest thing.
One of our things our stepmom liked to do is change the kids that she adopted their names against their wishes. I didn't want my name changed. I know our little sister didn't want her name changed. I don't know about the other two, but
I
you're not mad about your name.
I'm not mad about mine, but I thought it was pointless.
Yeah.
But my original middle name was confusing to spell, and
No one knew how to spell it.
no one knew how to spell it. It's funny. If you ask either one of our biological parents how to spell my original middle name, they'll give you two different answers.
Never pick a name that you don't know how to spell.
And I don't know that either of the answers they give are what's actually on the birth certificate. So
Yeah, well, it's not on there anymore. Yeah.
Now it doesn't matter. But so all that to say, our stepmother did have us maintain contact with our mother long enough to get in the good graces enough to terminate those parental rights. After the rights were terminated, our mother was told there would be a certain level of visitation still, and that nothing was going to change, and this was just paperwork. And
she's immediately started looking for excuses to stop that. And you know what's funny is if you ask our father why, he will bring up the story that happened to you when you were little.
Yeah.
He will not bring up anything around that. That had been how many years prior? 6?
At least 6.
Yeah, like there was no reason.
Those two things did not connect. Those timelines don't connect.
I know, but he even like brought that up in our final conversation, and I was like, I think you have this in your head more than Beth does right now. But anyway, so we went through that. You talked about in our last episode where you talked to her briefly when you did run away, and then you stopped just because you were kind of trying to cut ties with everybody and didn't want to have to owe anybody anything. And so our grandmother had kind of like guilted you into something, and you were like, no, I'm not going to do this.
Attempt to. She actually left a voicemail that said, you owe me more than, and I was like, I don't owe you.
Yeah. So you stopped talking to her again. That was the second time.
Yeah.
So when I did not start talking to her until I was in Florida, it was under the suggestion of my therapist to she wanted to understand what happened with her and I, because I had not talked about her in therapy, and she was curious as to what had happened. And then I kind of told her, and she had just said, have you ever tried talking with her now? Because it seems like you didn't have a choice as to not like to go no contact with her. And I was like, I guess I didn't have a choice to go no contact with her. Oh, no. Actually, do you know what started me talking to her? This is it was a God moment, actually. I was struggling. I was on the struggle bus in Florida. When it came to paying bills, I didn't have a lot of money. I was working 3 jobs, trying to go to school. And our mom's stepdad we were very close to him, Papa Jack. And I'm not going to cry over him. I'm not going to cry. He passed away a couple of years ago. And my papas were my favorite. So anyway, he sent me a check in the mail with a sticky note. And it just said, I love you bunches, always here for you, Papa Jack. And I'm not even sure. I don't even remember how he got my address. He got it from somebody. He sent me that note. And I was just like, it made me really emotional. So I brought it up in therapy because I didn't know how to process that. I had also not been allowed to talk to him. So we were forcibly no contact with him.
Mhm.
With our grandmother and our birth mother. So when I brought it up in therapy, about the same exact thing happened. And I started crying. So my therapist said, I think that's where she was like, hey, what's going on with this?
There's something unresolved here.
Maybe we should talk about your biological mom and her family. I was like, okay. So I reached out because of that check. And that check came at a good time. I was not doing well, and it actually helped me pay for my registration on my car that year. It came around my birthday. And yeah, so it was like a blessing. So I ended up, I don't know, I reached out to her. I don't remember how I got her number. I may have had it. I don't know if she maybe didn't change it. No, I think I called the house number at Grammy's
That's
because it's the
possible because
same.
they've still had that up until recently.
Yeah, it was the same number since we were kids. And I I don't know, I don't remember the process of our reconnection, but it was simply like Ashley had said, "Hey, if you're going to, maybe you should just ask her some questions about what happened. Ask her about, you know, her point of view of everything because you've only heard, it seems like, one side of things." And I was like, that's a good point. And so we had this, heart to heart where I was honest and I asked her a ton of questions. It was interesting because a lot of her answers started to like line up with memories I had had. And in this, she took a lot of accountability for everything. She had told me she had been with a therapist for, at that point, I think it was like 6 years, 7 years. She was with a psychiatrist who had gotten her on a great medication regimen, and she was working on herself. So during that time, she had been through a lot had happened, and she had started to turn her life around. And I don't know, it was such a weird contrast of our other mother or stepmother and her. And so I don't know, we slowly started talking. It was very like gradual. I would just call, and I told her I would like to be the one to call you. Like I still want this to be on, my terms. And she was very respectful of that too, which I remember that stood out to me. Every boundary I set with her, she kept. I didn't have to enforce it. She just said, "Yep." And she would keep it. She would not call me. I would call her. And then eventually, it just got easier. So that's how I started to talk to her again. Like you were saying, the accountability was a big thing for me. And I was going through therapy. There's a lot about me that I was changing. I could recognize that I wasn't the best version of myself prior to therapy. And I was becoming a much different version as I was getting older. And I could see that reflection in her journey. And so it was weird. And I still, I think to this day, struggle with what that looks like because I did go so long without her as my mother, but I do I see her very much as a mother figure now, not like the mother that you would think where, rocks you to sleep, but, I call her about a lot. I would say we have a really good relationship because she continues to keep my boundary or the boundaries that I set. And she continues to be respectful of our father when there's many times I almost wish that she wasn't. Like I want her to, and she won't. She stays, she's like, that's your father and I will never disrespect him. And I'm like, it's okay. I give you a pass. And she won't do it.
In fact, if I remember correctly, there was a point where you were no contact and she did a touch base with you because of her own past with her own father to just make sure you understood the full ramifications of what could happen while you were no contact. And she wanted to make sure you were going to be okay.
I was prepared for that. Yeah.
So she actually advocated for him a little bit.
I wish that he would see some of these that we're doing because it would probably be, he wouldn't believe any of it. But she was like, I went through this. She has a very similar story to ours. Very similar story to ours. It's crazy. In psychology in school, we learn about how even our DNA seems to have coded patterns, and that's what therapy is all about, recoding and rewiring a lot of these. But her childhood was like copy paste of ours. So she knew what it was like to go no contact, like you're saying. Her father passed away. He was in Vietnam and he passed away from what's it called?
Agent Orange. He got cancer as a result of Agent Orange.
So it was a sudden thing for her, and she was able to like talk with him prior to, but
Yeah, so they had been no contact for a few years. And he called her, and she wasn't initially going to answer, if I remember the story correctly, but she felt compelled to answer for some reason in October. And he called and he told her his diagnosis and he told her his prognosis. And so she did start talking to him again at that point, and then he passed away in January. So they had been no contact for years. They had about 2.5 months of contact, and then he passed away.
yeah.
And she just wanted to make sure that you know, you knew what could happen.
When Hurricane Helene happened last year, our family lives in Western Carolina. We were from Western Carolina, and we were in the area that was, greatly devastated by Hurricane Helene. That was when I started talking to him again. So I think her putting that in my head kind of was like, So yeah, she advocated for him. She's always been very respectful. She even tried for a while to be respectful of our stepmother, but at a certain point, I was like, no, give it up. Like, please, I need you to not be like, I need us to be on the same level when we talk about her.
And when she and I first went into contact again, I was not yet no contact with our stepmother, and she was respectful of her, until the point where she didn't have to be anymore because we weren't in contact anymore.
Yeah, I pushed hard for you to connect with her again, actually.
Yeah.
Because I felt like you had a deeper connection with her when we were little. And I don't know why, but I was just like, oh, I know, actually. It kind of hurt my heart a little bit for her when you got married and that whole thing around it. And it wasn't your fault. I know I know who, was at the base of that, but I wanted to show her some pictures of you and asked you first to be respectful. And you said, yeah, you could, or I could. And then I was like, like she really would just like to talk to you. And it wasn't until you moved out, though, right?
Well, yeah. So she and I don't know why it happened, but it happened in January of 2020. You and I had several conversations about the fact that you were talking to her again, and like what you were experiencing and what that experience was like for you. And you you didn't even like strong arm me about it. It wasn't like you were like, you do this or else. You just said that I think it was that
it was when you went oh no, it wasn't. It was right before. But so in my mastermind, Taylor Swift mastermind head, I thought if you had contact with her, you could see a parallel of two people and how they choose to see what was done to us. Because I was trying that was where I was strong arming you. I really wanted you to not talk to our stepmom anymore. I really wanted you to be out of the house. That was my big thing. It wasn't even as much not talk to her.
I was out of the house.
No, when but I from the time you got married, I started really pushing for that. Or before you got married, I'm sorry. The time you got engaged, I started to push for it. And I felt like it was coming, and I felt like you needed somebody. And I had relayed to her, I do remember this. She said, you can ask her any question you want. She will, whatever. Like it's on your pace, whatever. And then I connected you guys, and then that was it. Yeah. For me.
So I agreed to meet her. We met at a Starbucks. We sat down. I asked her some heavy hitting questions, things I had been told or felt like I had experienced or witnessed. And yes, I did that. Yes, I did that. No, I didn't do that, but I did do that. She even admitted to some things that I didn't ask about.
And if she just, too, I want to add, because if she says, I didn't do it, she won't say, no, I didn't do that. She'll say, I don't recall doing that, but I'm sorry if it hurt you. So she doesn't dismiss our feelings in that situation. And that's one thing I also respected. It's like, I didn't do that. I'm sorry though that it's affected you this way, if you felt like I did. So that she at least like affirmed our feelings, which was a big contrast.
Yeah.
I don't know, for me, she did that.
Yeah. And kind of the same story after that. We started slowly just rebuilding our relationship back up after that. And here we are, 5 years.
I remember when I flew into Charlotte and you and her picked me up.
Mm-hmm. That Thanksgiving, it was that first Thanksgiving after.
And we were driving back from the airport. And there was this moment of like, I couldn't remember the last time we'd all three been in the car, but it felt so familiar. Like, we all liked the same music. We were laughing. We were just...
There was no pressure.
It was a very healing moment. Yeah, there was no pressure.
Subsequently, by reconnecting with her, we were able to reconnect with our grandparents. Had a few really great years, a few really great holidays. So yeah.
And just an FYI, I heard her stepdad, who I'm crying about too, and you were tearing up about, his name was Papa Jack. He was a police officer. Our grandmother met him when I don't remember how old I was. Maybe 3. And I remember going to his house for the first time, and he had strawberries, and we watched Barney.
And he sat and watched it with us. Like, it wasn't just that he turned it on and went in the other room. He sat and watched it with us every time.
Sometimes begrudgingly. He didn't like Barney as much as he liked Bear the Big Blue House. He told us, though, like, hey, I remember when SpongeBob was going to air. He reminded me. It's tonight.
Yeah. If it was important to us, it was important to him.
So he took us in like he was our biological grandfather. We didn't have that from her dad. So we got that from him, and it was really special.
Loafing.
He would say that we were going loafing if we were going to go out and run errands. Like, we loved to go to the flea market, to the junction to get lunch. The junction was like this, it was like this restaurant. It was literally at a junction, and there was like a train that would go around the top. You could see there was like ice cream. You could get as much as you wanted. He would take us there. We go to Strawberry Hill.
Went to Sonic and got the most disgusting slushies. But like, he would let us order whatever kind we wanted.
Whatever we wanted. I could get the foot-long chili dog versus the smaller one. He would let me get the full one. I remember if we, like, one time it was, I think, like 9:30 at night, KFC was going to close at 10 o'clock, and I said I wanted honey barbecue chicken wings, and he got up and went and got me honey barbecue chicken wings.
Yep. He's the only person that I would watch the WNBA with.
He got me into basketball, definitely. I used to watch Carolina versus Duke, and I was a Carolina fan with him because he was. And obviously, when I got sick, I became a Duke fan. And so when we reunited, that was actually a fun thing we would do, was he would talk about basketball with me.
All of that to say, reconnecting with her, it went very well. It went very positively. She was respectful. She took accountability where she should, and has continued to take accountability in places, in things that have come up later. She continues to take accountability.
And stay respectful, too.
And does remain respectful.
It was as successful, I think, as a reunification could go. And we wanted to talk about that because I think that people think no contact is like a death sentence to your relationship. And if, and again, the reason is, as you said earlier, accountability, giving them the space to like be accountable for what they did, to work on the issues that are affecting us. Like there's things that our birth mom can't fix. She wants to, but she can't. But that wasn't what we need. And so like when you have one thing in therapy that I have been told is like you should never expect them to fix the past because they can't fix the past. It's not possible. All they can do is work on themselves, and they can be accountable for what they did. And they can, change from here on out. And I think a sign of a parent who's ready to maybe come back into your life is one who can keep boundaries. You set a boundary, they can keep them. And that is, I think, a big part of it. And they can claim accountability.
And so that's going to lead us into our third parent, which has been the most difficult for us at times when we've both been no contact, and sometimes at times when we've been contact. And that's going to be our dad. And I don't want to negate, for me specifically, because I know that it's different for both of us, I don't want to negate like, oh, it wasn't hard to be no contact with our mom, and it was hard to be no contact with our dad. That's not the case. And I feel like that's an important distinction to make for me specifically.
Yeah.
Because I was very close to our mom. Being no contact with her the first time.
I think the whole time, subconsciously.
I fought it. I fought it. And it literally took our stepmom creating a scenario that she did fabricate and breaking my heart for me to go no contact and to accept it. She literally had to do one of the most heinous things I could ever imagine doing to someone in order to sever that bond. So it was not easy. And it was not until that accountability talk that we had in January of 2020 that I realized that so when we talk about when I said, oh, I don't owe you anything the second time I went no contact, I still had that fabricated scenario in my head as a backbone at that point. Because it was not until we had the conversation in 2020 where I realized that thing did not happen. So I just want to make that distinction that when I say our dad is the most difficult, it's because of a scenario that was fabricated with the malicious intention of severing my bond with her.
I think too, let's also say it was it's the most surface level difficult. Because in this case, subconsciously, the other one was continued, I think, to be difficult on you. Surface level, it's difficult for our dad because there was never that villain story of him like there was for her.
Yeah.
Like you said, it had to be created. So do you mind if I ask you what, like, if you tell them like what that story was, what it took for you to sever that bond with her?
Yeah, so it requires a little bit of a backstory that I don't think we've talked about a lot on here. So when I was 8 or 9, I think, you and I briefly talked in one of the episodes about how I would go stay with our mom and you didn't sometimes, that you were fine to just stay at grandma and grandpa's and I wanted to go be with our mom and I would go. So during one of those occasions, our mom was married at the time to he would have been our stepdad. He was an alcoholic He had a teenage daughter from a previous relationship himself. So there was a time where I'm not going to tell the whole story because I can't.
Yeah.
But the end of the story, at the end of that night, was I witnessed him physically abuse his daughter, in like, 3 feet away from me.
Yeah.
And to our mom's credit, as soon as that event happened, she put me in the car. She took me to our our grandparents' house, to grandma. Um, you know, she removed me from the situation immediately.
Yeah.
It did leave a lasting impression that whole day. There's just a lot surrounding that entire day. So it was a lot for a long time. So fast forward to our stepmom needing to create a wedge. So she fabricated a situation where she told me that she had brought that night up to our mom, and our mom told her, "Oh, that never happened. Bethany just made that up. That never happened. That's not what happened. That didn't happen." And then was pretty malicious with me about, and I even went and checked with your grandma Jean because at first I wasn't sure if I believed you or not either. And so in my mind, I believed that, our mom had done that.
That's one thing that was a trigger for you and I growing up. Our stepmom would call us dramatic very often. And so in this sense, I believe she posed it as our birth mom kind of calling you dramatic.
She did, because one thing that she says that I said, and I don't actually remember saying this, but our stepmom claims that I said, "I always knew she was a liar, but I never thought she'd lie about me."
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember ever saying that, but I do remember believing our stepmom about that story because at the time I had no reason not to believe her.
I remember when it happened because I remember she left and and then our stepmom had you come in the room and I wasn't allowed to be in the room. And she told you something and you started crying and you like ran to your room and I asked you what it was and you wouldn't even tell me what happened.
So that was the event. That was what happened. So, it took her creating that.
Master manipulator. Like, she knew that was your weakest point. Like, she finds your weaknesses. Like I'm saying, they find your weaknesses and they exploit them. She knew that was your Achilles heel. That was your big trauma that had happened to you. And so and then she knew you hated to be called, dramatic or overreactive.
Or a liar.
Or a liar. And so then she put all of those things together. It's tragic because it's so messed up to use a kid as a pawn, your feelings, what you went through, your experiences as a pawn. And this is a great segue into why I have struggled with our father.